And welcome everybody to another edition of Terms Defined. Today's term that we'll be talking about is one that's perhaps all too popular nowadays: propaganda. So the first thing we've done is we've brought it up here on Merriam-Webster, and we've allowed our Minister of Propaganda to join us, Eugene Bagashov, otherwise known as Eugene the Philostopher, and thanks for accepting the position as Minister of Propaganda here at the Smash News Network, these busted name and news. Eugene, how are things?
Hello, everyone. Well, I hear for the friend that I've been appointed the Minister of Propaganda, but I guess okay.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate your taking that job. It's gonna all be You're gonna be the chairman of the Ministry of Truth. It's gonna be
All
epic.
right. I'm gonna delete people from history and add new people,
All right. Yeah.
which has been pretty much done throughout all of history by all the people, like all the elites.
Yeah, the winners write history, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you
It's not a joke. I absolutely agree.
Oh, it's 100%. So anyway, we're on Merriam-Webster's page here about
Propaganda.
and yeah, so apparently capitalized propaganda means a congregation of the Roman Curia having jurisdiction over missionary territories and related institutions. So the term originally came from government, essentially set up by the Catholic Church as the
Uh,
Catholic
uh,
Church sort of spread.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it government, but yes, it was like the church officials. Like it's Pope Gregory the 15th in 1622 created this organization called Congregatio de Propaganda Fide, which basically means, uh, congregation of propagation of faith, right? So propaganda meant literally like propagation. It's like literally the same root even in English. So
Yeah, so it was
yeah,
literally just a reference
spreading
to a group
faith.
of
So
people.
it's a
Yeah.
yeah, sort of like a missionary organization or quasi-missionary, because I would assume they've had also something like secret police maybe of theirs, or sort of like
Sure,
a
maybe
Jesuit
something like that. Yeah.
type stuff. Yeah,
Anyway, I
which
wasn't even
again,
I wasn't even aware of the capitalized version of it. Of course, that's going back really long in time. I assume it probably hasn't meant that for a while. And the definitions recently changed in the 20th century. We'll actually get to that eventually here. And I want to get off this Merriam-Webster page, so let's just go through the rest of the definitions here. This also non-capitalized, the spreading of ideas, information, or rumor for the purpose of helping or injuring an institution, cause, or person. Also, ideas, facts, or allegations spread deliberately to further one's cause or to damage an opposing cause. So this is a pretty common thing in today's world. And without getting into specifics, unless Eugene wants to, we picked Eugene because of his geographic location. I won't say anything more about that. And we've put up some, this would be some international communist propaganda, probably disseminated into England or something like that in 1940. So this one's from 1940. And I just did a general search. We just looked at we shopped through like a dozen different propaganda posters just to figure out which one to sort of display here while we talk. Back to you, Eugene.
yeah, I mean, you can appreciate that they've foresaw the coming of Putin in the lower left, you see. And he also has a Spider-Man costume, which is also something that is hard to underestimate. So yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know Spider-Man was invented by 1940s in England. I was apparently maybe old Stan stole the idea from whoever this guy is, who's trying to be convinced by this guy. So this guy here, he doesn't have one of these driving caps on, but this guy
Yeah,
here,
so
you
I
know,
assume he's supposed to be like the, more educated leader of the working class, so to speak.
right, like he's a
Where,
really smart blacksmith or something
yeah,
like that, which is
yeah,
why he's
yeah.
dressed that way. And these guys are like, I'm not so sure if it would be a good idea to follow this here communism. And
Well, it
he's like,
looks like they are actually quite convinced. You see, they have rifles or something akin to that.
oh yeah, those might be
So,
rifles or shotguns or something. Yeah, that's true. They're like, why should we go hunting when we can go work in an urban factory? This guy's right. And look at his luscious red locks. I mean, you could believe this guy's Irish. Who knows where he came from, but he's carrying this flag that's I've never seen that one before. It's got, let's see, it's got the crossed wheat, the gears, and then instead of the hammer and sickle, it's got the carpentry claw hammer and torch. So that's a different symbolism there for apparently 1940s UK international communist movement. Anyway, let's just go to the Wikipedia article here. And before we do that, by the way, Eugene, I don't know if you were aware, we've made some changes to smashamash.com. We've got subscription services now underneath this tab. And because we're phasing out Patreon, but not abruptly, we're sort of keeping that probably until New Year's, and maybe permanently we may keep a tier over there. And it's not because we dislike Patreon or anything like that, but we just need to be on our own to sort of avoid the limitations of the software. So some changes coming over there. You can also find our social media here, as well as links to our merch shop. I'm currently wearing the Mensa hat. I don't know if you can see it or not. Let's see if you can see it. I think you can see it.
I cannot.
It's not real clear because
now
I'm a bit keyed out. So yeah, and that stands for it's not a partisan hack logo. Mensa just simply stands for Make Earth Not Suck Again. And you can,
did you deliberately use the same word as this IQ organization?
As this IQ, what do you mean IQ organization?
Mensa is like a collective, like a gathering of people with IQ over 99, I think, or 98.
No, it's over 130, but yeah, no, it's not. It's
sorry, yeah, I mean 99th percentile.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with that. It's just we're just riffing off of everybody. It's sort of meant to be a little bit on the inflammatory side.
I think,
yeah, it's sort of made to enrage people. You know what I mean? Like we're riffing on MAGA. You know, Make America Great Again. So we've got one that says Mensa, Make America Not Suck Again. We've got the new Smash team design.
It's Mansa, like through A. Okay.
Yeah, we've got Mansa and Mensa. So
okay.
Mensa, where the heck is it? Mensa's not showing up. Oh, there it is. It was on a shirt. Yeah, so Make Earth Not Suck Again, Make America Not Suck. And by the way, we've already sent one of these to Tasmania. I think she bought a shirt and a hat or something like that. Anyway, so back to propaganda here on Wikipedia now that I've put out some propaganda about how you should buy the products because the designs are brilliant and the print quality is ridiculous. So Wiki's saying a little bit of different stuff here, and let's get into sort of the changes that have been going on since the 20th century. So here in America, for example, the term propaganda is extremely negative connotated. And that's just recently changed in the 20th century. And indeed, according to the Wiki article, in a lot of places, it doesn't have anywhere near the negative connotation that it has here. So back to you, Eugene. What do you think about this?
Well, I can give you like a very deep philosophical analysis of what's going on.
Oh boy.
I'll try to be brief. So basically, previously, the connectedness, I guess, of societies was pretty low, and information was spreading pretty slowly, right?
Before World War II, I'd say, right?
Yeah, roughly. I mean, before World War I, even more so, because
once
even
electricity was widespread and people had phones and televisions and telegraphs and so on.
Yes, that accelerated, and it kind of accelerated exponentially.
Sort of like the new printing press and sort of like the old internet.
Yeah. So the more this interconnectedness rose, the more people realized that they've been, they are living in their own sort of what is called commonly informational bubbles, right? So one area is controlled by one set of narratives, the other may be controlled by the other. And they really only clashed during wars, like, again, World War II. And when this clash arises, when people recognize that there are other opinions, then, a question arises like which opinion is the true one, in air quotes. And some people might claim that our opinion is the true opinion and their opinion is like evil propaganda.
Yeah,
right?
and
so they're spreading misinformation deliberately, and this is the term that they use for that.
Right, because they're like our widgets are better, or our politics are better, or something. Our military is better.
Yeah, our president is the wise, leader, and their president is the evil dictator, something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think
And it's the same on the other side, basically. They say the same things.
yeah, it's like
So,
xenophobia kind of had to get reduced a little bit because of the global communication efforts that were underway. Everybody, it's I think it's to everybody's benefit to be able to talk to a guy in Belarus, for example, sort of freely and be able to record phone calls like this. Um,
yeah, I would agree.
and this forces me to be less of an idiot, frankly, because for all of you people who've never left your hometown out there, the more you travel, the less xenophobic, racist, and bigoted you'll become because you'll probably realize that people are really similar, even in fourth world nations with no electricity and dirt floors.
Yeah, I would
Maybe Eugene
agree.
disagrees, but that's my stance.
No, no,
That's
absolutely.
I've been to Europe, so that's sort of my stance on it. I think everybody. I think the more different you people, the more different people think other people are, the more you ought to travel. Even the term race is basically a phony term because if you can reproduce and produce fertile offspring with something, you're the same species.
Yeah,
Anyway, just to con-
biologically at least, in
yeah,
biological terms.
yeah. So just to continue on here, so there are different kinds of propaganda also, and so for example, you've got historic propaganda, right, which is people are very familiar with that. Around World War II, there was a lot of propaganda to the point where it even uh, it even was used by militaries in vast campaigns where entire entire fake armies were created in order to draw Hitler's forces to places where the Allies weren't located, with inflatable tanks and in call signs and unit patches and all that stuff was all created for completely fake stuff, sort of a strategic propaganda. I mean, you've even got if you want to really get deep into it, you could even say something like a feint in the sport of fencing is propaganda because I'm trying to trick Eugene into making a move that I'm planning through a feint, and that's sort of a tactical version of propaganda. And then, of course, you've got like geopolitical propaganda, which is, of course, very common. Uh, Putin wants the Russian press to make Putin look good, and whoever Castro's brother wants Cuban press to make Castro's brother look good, right? Juan Castro, I think his name is.
Yeah, I
And
don't
that's
know.
just but the most important kind that I think Eugene and I are regularly running into would be scientific propaganda, which is in many ways the most offensive to me, especially considering the last 2 years. You were saying
I didn't say anything. I mean, it's kind of
it's
obvious in my mind, but I don't know. In my eyes, I mean.
okay. So
So it's the same thing. Like you have some, let's say, roughly established scientific establishment, let's call it that, which has its own interests, etc., and it kind of translates its own worldview that it benefits from to the public, and it tries to suppress all the competition, all the alternative, let's say, views, alternative scientific theories. And let's say, again, a very common propagandist term in this realm is pseudoscience. So if they want to, call you an evil propagandist, they would call you a pseudoscientist.
yeah, so let's expand on that for a minute here. Galileo and Copernicus are largely sort of blamed for us believing that the Earth is spherical. It's something that would have probably, and of course, wasn't there an ancient Greek that very accurately measured the diameter of the planet using shadows
Yeah, I
at
think
the
it
at the
was
solstice or something?
Eratosthenes, if that's the correct English pronunciation, but
Yeah,
okay,
something
yeah.
like that.
And again, allegedly, although I don't quite buy this story, but again, supposedly there was this how do you call it? Well, uh, a sailing around the world, let's say in plain language, of Magellan, if
Magellan,
that's
right?
yeah. So again, supposedly that was in early 16th century, so 1570 something like that.
Yeah, and he didn't quite make it. He died, but the ship actually
Yeah.
did make it all the way around. His crew
Again,
completed his.
again, supposedly, like
Yeah, yeah.
according to the version of history that we currently learn in schools.
But what I'm getting at here is it's very interesting that Galileo would be considered a pseudoscientist if you were currently in Galileo's time. You know, he was locked up
Yeah.
because of his refusal to sort of uh, back up the status quo. That I guess that was once again the Catholic Church. No,
Well, yeah, probably. I mean, officially, yeah.
considered a
That
heretic
was,
for believing
yes.
that the Earth goes around the sun and not vice versa. Because back then you couldn't make a song that sounded dissonant.
Yeah. But really, like, who made this idea popular was Kepler. Like, sort of, you can say that Galileo popularized Copernicus and Kepler popularized Galileo. So ultimately, it was Kepler who made the idea really popular,
And
like
that's why we like
sort
having
of
you on. You don't have to look this
mainstream.
stuff up. I have a hard time remembering people's names and dates and so on.
Okay.
So, a little bit about the etymology of the word. It's just literally from the word to propagate. It just means that which is to be propagated. And sort of this is, you know, to quote Wikipedia, the term began taking on a pejorative or negative connotation in the mid 19th century when it was used in the political sphere. So, apparently, not
Yeah,
all definitions
that's.
require propaganda to be false.
I assume that was when like Marxists appeared, like
It's got to be
1844,
something like that.
Communist
Yeah.
Manifesto.
Certainly, yeah, certainly before the 20th century, because the sort of the first application of any of that on a large scale would be Lenin's government, right?
Hmm. If you mean the term itself, then probably yeah, something like that.
Like the first large scale actual communist government.
Yeah,
And of
yeah,
course, there
probably.
was the communist school of thought sort of actually came out of Germany, not Russia, and part of the reason that the Third Reich hated Russia so much is because they said our socialism is better than your socialism, pretty much. At least not everybody seems to think that Nazism is right wing nowadays. Some people understand that it's for giant government, giant works projects, and nothing about that is right wing in most people's opinion, but that's been some recent propaganda about the way people line up politically. And of course, there's a lot of that because nowadays, you may not be aware of this, Eugene. Nowadays, if your political stance is like to the right of Bernie Sanders, you are now considered a far right extremist.
I've sent you a link to one of the Lenin's programs, which literally called Plan of Monumental Propaganda from 1918.
That sounds great. We'll just bring that up here.
It's about like art, like what you should do to, propagandize the communist ideals, etc., etc. Like who you're gonna give money to, what kind of ideas you're gonna support.
Yeah, we'll open that up. All right. So there is that. And just 1 minute. All right, Eugene, there's your page on monumental propaganda, a strategy proposed by Vladimir Lenin. Never heard of this one before.
Yeah, it's the bastard son of John Lennon, so he had to change his last name.
He changed the spelling of it so he wouldn't be associated with Vladimir Lenin.
No, with John Lennon.
John Lennon was the author of monumental propaganda known as the
No,
song Imagine a Communist
he was
Manifesto song.
yes.
Maybe that pissed somebody off. Congratulate. If you're now angry, please leave us a comment and tell us why. We read all comments, and we won't censor you, although we may berate you publicly, so that's fair warning. Quote, the plan, end quote, had the significance of creating a large demand for monumental sculpture on the state level, which is why that's why Lenin is depicted at the Strait of Hormuz straddling the strait, right, Eugene?
I don't know.
You
I
have
didn't hear
you have
about that.
yeah, you have to sail underneath Lenin's testicles in order
Oh, okay, I
to make
see.
it through the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay,
Yeah,
fair enough.
it's quite, and of course you're not allowed to photograph it, otherwise you'd be able to find images of it on the internet.
Yeah, but I mean, I would imagine that on both sides of the strait there are pretty anti-communist nations. I mean, communist is supposedly atheistic, whereas they aren't.
Right, right.
So
Yeah,
I
because
wouldn't.
you wouldn't want something of greater importance than the state. The state is the answer to all of our issues. So why would you need God when you can just worship the government?
Pretty much. Yeah.
I know how this stuff works. Anyway, so yeah, monumental propaganda. I like this. And apparently, so I guess, so just to summarize this, what we're talking about is giant sculptures. Like, for example, of Saddam Hussein, right? That would be an example of
Yeah.
monumental propaganda. This guy must be good. Otherwise, why would somebody build an 80-foot stone statue of him?
Yeah.
Here's
But
an
not only
obelisk.
that, I mean, you can see there are not like various artists are mentioned, not just the sculptors or architects, like all kinds of arts should be involved.
So check this out. Here's a perfect example of Soviet architecture. You know, I guess you could say megalithic socialist architecture here, and it's an obelisk with a Statue of Liberty in Soviet Square. How do you like that? Some symbols very common with Americans there, uh, depicted in the Soviet Square. The Moscow Statue of Liberty. I was not aware
Yeah.
of that one.
Well, as you can see, it was taken down. So
Ah, yes, 1941. Some Germans probably blew it up or something, right?
Germans weren't in Moscow. They were
Oh, right.
near
They never made it to
Moscow.
Moscow, did they?
They didn't take it. Yeah.
So that was probably pulled down because it looks like American symbolism. That would be my guess.
Um, I don't think so. I mean, by 1941, there were probably already negotiations with Americans in terms of like uh, military assistance or even humanitarian aid, like Lend-Lease and all of that stuff.
How about this one? The Robespierre Monument, unveiled on November 3rd, 1918, destroyed only 3 days later. Yeah. Look at this guy. This guy looks mad. He's like, don't take my photo. I'm going to destroy this thing in 3 days. Anyway, let's head back. Anything else to say about propaganda, Eugene?
Um, I don't know really. I mean, again, like it's a term which is very, uh, again, a very stupid word, toxic, if you like, today, because well, it basically means nothing already. Like everyone uses it, and I don't know. Like if you say that somebody is a propagandist, it means like they're spreading misinformation by default, and therefore you're not gonna have a debate with them, right? And it only like reinforces these previously mentioned informational bubbles, right? Where
Yeah, it's a
the
weighted
left,
term in that respect, definitely. It could shut down discourse, right?
yeah, so leftists are in their bubble, the right wing people are in their bubble, I don't know, relativistic scientists are in their bubble, and
Right, right.
anti-Einstein people are in their bubble, and everyone calls each other propaganda, and nobody really discusses like the actual problems and how are we going to solve them. So this is very unhealthy in this respect. So
It's a giant clown show of propaganda to fight other propaganda, such as when you start
sort of.
arguing with somebody about science and it devolves into a conversation about some completely moved goalposts because you haven't resolved the initial thing because they can't debate you on facts. I'm sure you've seen that happen in a YouTube comment section, right, Eugene?
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately again.
Anyway, that will be
Well,
a time.
again, I can appreciate like if people just need to like vent, like do some crazy stupid stuff.
Have a
Like,
temper
yeah,
tantrum. Yeah, I think it's healthy to have
fair
a temper
enough.
tantrum,
But
right?
like I wish there were also places where like real actual dialogue could happen. But there are no such places. Like people are having temper tantrums everywhere, pretty much. So
What do
yeah.
you think about the fact that the leader of the Taliban is able to tweet and Donald Trump's not? You think that's appropriate for Twitter there? Seems a little bit maybe a little on the skewed side. I think they might be playing politics and attempting some electioneering. Maybe they're trying to get the Taliban leader elected president of Afghanistan. What do you think?
I think that indeed, like absolutely, Twitter, as any other large resource, is involved in politics because again, it's the control over information. Like, if you remember, like who created your country was basically a formerly British spy and then French spy, Benjamin Franklin, who were head of the post of all the 13 colonies. Therefore, he controlled basically all the information that came into the colonies and out of the colonies. So that was pretty much the most important person already back then, because like when you have to sail for 3 months, from
Yeah,
England to New York or Boston, then surely like the information that is contained on this ship, like in the form of letters or whatever, would be very important. Like there's simply no other means of sending it.
right, exactly. No telegraph, no carrier pigeons. We're making that journey. So anything else about propaganda, Eugene, before we close this thing out?
I think we've talked about everything more or less.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, Eugene. Thanks, viewers, for tuning in. Don't forget to visit our links. Don't forget to subscribe to Eugene's YouTube channel, Eugene the Philostopher. We'll include links in the description for that. And thanks again, Eugene. See you next time.
Yeah, thanks to you and to all the viewers or listeners. Goodbye.